Today, we're digging into a fantastic story about a dynasty that soared to incredible heights of power, only to completely vanish into dust. We're going to figure out how it all went so wrong. And the clues, well, they're buried deep in history.
It's a question that you see again and again throughout history, right? How does a powerful, seemingly stable civilization just crumble? Well, today we're going to find some answers by looking into one of the most spectacular collapses in the ancient world.
And believe it or not, the clues are all wrapped up in the story of ancient Egypt's 6th dynasty. It's a wild tale of a glorious peak followed by a decline so slow, so gradual, that nobody saw the end coming until it was way too late. So let's start at the very beginning.
Now, every dynasty has a beginning, but the 6th dynasty's start was, well, it was more like a cliffhanger, and it all begins with its founder, a king named Teti.
So Teti's path to the throne was, let's just say, unconventional. He wasn't the son of the pharaoh before him. Nope. Instead, he married into the royal family. He secured the throne through his wife, Queen Ipet. So right from the get-go, this wasn't a simple father-to-son handover. This was a calculated political move.
And all that political tension, it seems to have followed him. There's this persistent, juicy rumor from history, recorded by the historian Manetho, that Teti was actually murdered by his own security detail. Now, we don't have Egyptian records to prove it, but the fact that the story even exists tells you his reign was probably plagued by instability. And if you want to understand the kind of pressure he was under, you just have to look at his official Horus name. Think of it like a pharaoh's personal mission statement. Teti chose "he who satisfies the two lands," talking about Upper and Lower Egypt. You just don't pick a name like that unless your main job is holding a fractured kingdom together. And this shaky foundation, it would eventually lead to a golden age, but one with a hidden, fatal flaw.
So, after that dramatic start, the dynasty finally finds its footing under Teti's son, Pipi I. Now, this is the golden age. This is the moment of absolute peak power, but it also contains the seeds of its own destruction.
For an incredible 50 years, Pipi I ruled over a stable and prosperous Egypt. For most people back then, that was a whole lifetime. This was an era of immense confidence, and you can really see that confidence in the art they were creating.
You see this confidence, especially in the art. The famous copper statues of Pepi I, they don't show some untouchable god. They show a man, a human ruler. The art became so much more realistic, and that reflects a whole new idea of what it even meant to be king.
But here's the thing. While the king was strong, so were other people. Way out in the provinces, far from the capital city, local governors were becoming incredibly powerful. I mean, they were almost like little mini-kings in their own territories, and this created a fundamental tension in the kingdom. So what was Pepi's solution? Well, it was brilliant. And also, ultimately, a huge mistake. He married the two daughters of a powerful governor from Abydos. This was totally unprecedented. A king marrying a non-royal to lock in a political alliance? Unheard of. In the short term, it worked. But in the long term? Oh boy. It sent a message that these local families were now basically on the same level as royalty. A shift that would have massive, massive consequences down the line.
With things pretty secure back home, the dynasty's ambition turned southward. They looked to the lands of Nubia, which were rich in gold, stone, and, just as important, manpower.
So Egypt's focus shifts south to Nubia. And we're not just talking about some casual trade. No, we're seeing these ambitious expeditions pushing deep into the continent. And even more importantly, Egypt started recruiting elite Nubian soldiers into its army. Suddenly, Nubia was becoming the engine for both Egypt's economy and its military. And the man leading this charge, his name was Harkuf. He was the governor of Aswan, which was basically the southern gateway to Egypt, and he was the kingdom's chief explorer. Now, lucky for us, he carved the story of his incredible career right onto the walls of his own tomb.
Seriously, his life reads like an adventure novel. He led 4 major expeditions deep into Africa. His first was to, and I quote, open the way to Yam, this mysterious far-off land. The next 2 journeys involved all this complex diplomacy and navigating local wars, but it's his 4th and final trip that gives us one of the most remarkable little stories from all of ancient Egypt.
Harkuf wasn't just a trader. He was a pioneer. In his own words, he boasts about being the very first Egyptian to ever reach some of these territories.
I mean, this was their age of exploration, and he was the guy on the front line. And this brings us to the central figure of our whole story, Pepi II. He's the king who inherited this powerful, ambitious kingdom and then oversaw its complete and total disintegration. 94 years. Just let that number sink in. Pepi II holds the record for the longest reign of any monarch in history. He ruled for so long that he outlived his own children, his grandchildren, and any real sense of a stable succession plan. See, he became king when he was just 6 years old. So for those critical early years, he wasn't really the one in charge. His mother and his uncle were acting as regents, basically ruling for him. And that meant, right from the very beginning, the central authority of the pharaoh was already watered down. And we have this amazing personal glimpse into his childhood. On that fourth expedition, our guy Harkuf managed to find a pygmy. They called it a dancing dwarf to bring back for the court. The young King Pepi II wrote him a letter, and he was just overcome with excitement. He told Harkuf to forget all the other treasures, just get the dwarf to the palace safely. And Harkuf was so proud of this letter from his king that he had the entire thing carved into his tomb for all eternity. A boy king's innocent letter is a charming story, but that boy grew into an old man who ruled for nearly a century. And during that time, all the problems we've seen brewing, they finally boiled over. So how did it all fall apart? Let's connect the dots. The collapse really came down to a simple, fatal equation. Over the decades, as the king's treasury just dwindled and dwindled, the power of those provincial governors grew and grew. It wasn't a sudden shock. It was a slow, creeping crisis that completely hollowed out the kingdom from the inside. So here's how all the threads connect. Remember those powerful governors? Well, their jobs became hereditary, passed down from father to son, creating their own little local dynasties. At the same time, the kings kept granting tax exemptions to temples and officials, which drained the royal treasury. Eventually, the governors just stopped paying taxes to the capital altogether. And the final nail in the coffin? Pepi II's impossibly long reign. It allowed all these problems to just fester for nearly a century, until the entire system just rotted from within. You know, it leaves us with a really crucial question. We often think of long reigns as a sign of stability, a good thing. But the story of Pepi II really forces us to ask, what is the true cost of that stability? At what point does it turn into stagnation and then inevitably collapse?